What evil lurks in the dark? A question we have all asked ourselves many times. Together, we can start uncovering the truth and mystery behind the darker side of the otherworldly. And now your host of See You in the Dark, Michelle Roos.
Well, Happy New Year to everyone. First show back for 2025. It's kind of an exciting show. We're going to talk all things spooky, but also going to take it more on a little metaphysical side of, when does that actually, get thinking? Um, do we use it during an investigation?
Sweetheart, you're sounding really digitized all of a sudden. I don't know what happened.
I don't know.
Could you back out and come right back in real quick? See if that.
Sure. Yep, I can sure do that. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Go right ahead, everybody. Stand by on the radio side and on the video side over here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Rumble. Pre-show, everybody sounded perfect. And all of a sudden, when we went live, she just all of a sudden came through very digitized. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you heard it. Yes, you guys. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for that. Just wanted to confirm that everybody else was hearing what I was hearing, and want to give her a chance to bounce out and reload back in and see if maybe that'll correct the problem. Got a great guest tonight. Jake is standing by in the green room. He's ready to come on. So let's hope that this will fix the issue and we can get this show off the ground. First show for 2025. We gotta have a goodie. Okay, stand by, everybody. We're getting the show launched. If you're just getting here, Michelle had a audio problem right out of the gate just a moment ago, where her audio was coming across very digitized. So, I've had that with this platform that we use once before, back about 2 years ago. It happened, and let's see if that fixes it.
How does that sound now?
There you go, sugar. You sound golden.
Awesome.
All right, do your thing, honey.
All right. Well, sorry about that. It seemed like I was having a little bit of mic trouble. But again, welcome everyone and Happy New Year's to you all. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and bring in my guest, Jake. Jake is actually part of Riverside, Iowa Paranormal. He is also an amazing psychic medium, but also uses divination tools at different points of time too. And so to bring him in to talk about, when we do an actual investigation, we use different equipment and things like that. But when we're talking about bringing in a little bit more of the metaphysical part of it to start talking with, the other side, it's kind of like, when do we actually start doing that? So, Jake, welcome.
Hello. Hopefully my audio sounds okay. That was a little bit weird there at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. I sounded good and then all of a sudden went robotic. But, hey, we might as well start the new year off with a little bit of a hiccup, because then this way we know we're not always in control of everything that has, what we can do when it comes to this kind of stuff. So, we've been on a lot of investigations together. We've used all the tools out there, from recorders to ghost box to tripwires. But, when we talk about using a little bit more of the metaphysical side to kind of tap into more of our spiritual side, when, in your opinion, would you say, is that something that should be done all the time to kind of cross the two over? Or are there certain times those things should be done?
I think you have to be very careful anytime you do anything, anything spiritual, whether it's investigation, whether you have certain spiritual practices that you do kind of daily or on a regular basis. You have to be very careful anytime you open yourself up like that, because a lot of these spiritual practices and even just investigating alone, you are opening yourself up to a lot of things that you have no control over. I know, Michelle, I've seen you do many a time where you, on investigations, will have people kind of relax and take a deep breath. And that's essentially how I start any spiritual practice, whether it's divination, tarot readings, anything like that. I do the same thing to calm myself down and to get my energy in the right place where it needs to be. And anytime you do that, you're opening yourself up to any energies that are surrounding you or any energies that you might be interacting with. So you have to be really, really careful. We've seen this in places, and you've actually seen me go down in a couple places as a result of this, because I didn't take care of myself and do what I needed to do to make sure that that I was doing this responsibly and safely. And it gets kind of scary when you open yourself up to that, because again, you have no control. And when these energies get into your energy field, they can do a lot of different things to you. We've seen it happen with guests. We've seen it happen with other team members. So I wanted to start off with just saying you have to be really careful anytime you do it. Now, in terms of, is there a right time to do it or a wrong time to do it? I would say there's no hard and fast rule. There have been times where you and I have gone into an investigation and you've asked for me to do a 3-card reading for the night, and we get there and we look at each other and I say to you, I'm just like, Michelle, this is not going to happen tonight. This is not a good place to do this. This is not the right time. So I would say there's no hard and fast rule. It's feeling out the place that you're at, what's going on around you, and then kind of using all of that information to determine, is it something you should be doing at that particular moment?
But, that brings up a good question too, because, like you said, there's times where you'll say, "No, this is not a good time to do a reading." But at that point, would it actually make more sense to do a reading to kind of prep for the night, because now you're using that that spiritual side to kind of guide us of how the evening's going to help us prep of taking care of people with us, in that sense? Or is it because if you do the reading, it could actually open other doors?
I think there's two sides to that, one of which you already talked about. Anytime you do any kind of divination, and one that gets a really bad rap, especially around the paranormal, and in my personal opinion, I feel like it's just misunderstood, and that is using a Ouija board. That can be used, and that is a form of divination. Um, and we all know that there's so many horror movies out and scary stories of using a Ouija board and it goes wrong. And that's kind of where I was mentioning before. You kind of have to make sure you're taking care of yourself and you're putting those protections in place, because could we do readings in those places where I've approached you and said, hey, this is probably not a good idea? Absolutely, we could have. I was making that decision because of how I was feeling, the things that I was getting. I felt that it was not safe for me to do that. Not to say that anything would have necessarily happened. I err on the side of caution. That's just my personality. But I make that decision because I don't feel like it would be safe for me to do that. And could I still do it? Absolutely, I could. Absolutely, I could. But it really comes down to, if I feel like I'm safe, anyone else there, because again, when we open up to collective readings like that, everyone has to kind of open their energy field. And if there's a place where I'm watching and picking up on some crazy stuff going on, I'm like, I don't want to put anyone in danger or in harm's way, because again, I can't control what comes through, either in a reading or can't control any of the spirits or the energies in a location. And so I never want to put anyone in a position where they are unsafe. And I certainly don't want to do that for myself. And so that's why I choose not to do those. That doesn't mean that I can't. It just
Well,
means that I don't feel like it's safe. Uh,
okay.
Go ahead.
But so, no, just to bounce off of that before we go too far. So, you're making those, like you said, if you're not feeling safe and stuff like that. But what about when we're at these investigations? You have people with abilities. That is already opening things up too. Would that also kind of put that in that category of, okay, like you said, maybe not doing a reading because you don't feel safe or something like that, but with the us that have abilities and we're open already scanning everything, are we putting that same type of maybe, danger there too? Because it's not just the cards, it's the energy that we're putting out.
Absolutely. I definitely believe that, and it goes back to this idea that we can't control the energies. And I would rather have as few things as possible out of my control when we're dealing with stuff like this, because we've been places where things have gotten pretty dark pretty fast. And we've seen that affect some of our guests that go with us. And so I'm coming from a place of there's already certain things that I can't control. And if I'm at a place where myself or I'm with other people that have abilities, or sometimes we even have guests that have abilities of some kind, whether it's sensitive or premonitions or anything like that, I there's already a lot of things that we can't control. And if it gets to a point where there's too much that I can't control, that's when I make the decision for myself that this isn't the right time to do this. And we've had it before where in that moment it wasn't the right time, but 2 hours later, as the event went on, things changed and I did a reading then. So things can change moment by moment. And when you don't have control of that much stuff going on around you, that can be really scary. And so I try, for the safety of myself and other people, I just want to have as much control over as much as I can, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
No,
So that's
it
how I
does.
see that.
Okay, so let's take you out of the equation because now we're looking at using divination and different things in just general paranormal,
Mhm,
So let's take you out as that person. We're talking, like you said, the Ouija board and stuff. And a lot of people do use that
mhm,
because, it is still goes back and forth in the paranormal field, using the board, whether, no, it can bring in a lot of the demonic stuff or it doesn't. But then we also use ghost box, we use recorders, we use different things. It's the same type of communication. Now,
mhm.
I personally think because we're not putting all that energy in it, but again, we are putting energy in that type of equipment,
Right.
just like we do when we're using dowsing rods and stuff like that. Do you think that we need to be putting ourselves more on the level of spirit to get correct answers? Because we turn on a box or we turn on some lights and we say, answer us this. And like, everybody asks that same old question, do you know you're dead?
Mhm.
Well, a lot of them don't, so that's why they come towards us. But, are we going after the paranormal kind of maybe down the wrong way because everybody's on that bandwagon of I seen it on TV, this is the only way to do it? Or should we be doing it more on the spiritual side to get correct communication because now we're putting ourselves on that higher vibration with them?
I That's a really interesting question. And I would say I think we should take more of a spiritual approach to this. That being said, make sure we're taking care of ourselves and our guests and things like that. And there are just certain things that trust your instincts, trust your gut feeling. Um, and if your gut is saying, "Hey, now's not the right time to do this," maybe don't do that particular practice, whatever that may be. But I agree with you. I think we have to meet spirit where they're at. And when we do that, we get a whole different kind of interaction. We've had the opportunity to investigate with other people in the paranormal field, not just guests, but other investigators. And we've gotten the opportunity to learn from each other with all of that. And that's one theme that I've noticed and observed with everyone that we've gotten to work with is they approach investigation as less of us going in and saying, "Hey, you're a spirit, I'm not. I want to know what it's like on your end." And they're approaching it more of just having a conversation, like sitting down at the table and they're someone you haven't talked to in 10 years and you're just catching up. And I've noticed that's when you get some of the most amazing responses. Now, spirits can always give you whatever information they want, just like people can. But I think if we meet them where they're at and we come to them more on that spiritual side, they're more likely to interact with us. And the more likely they are to interact with us, the less likely we are to misinterpret any lights or sounds or anything like that that might be coming across the equipment.
Yeah, and this past year we've been on a lot of investigations and I kind of watch it because I know when we have guests at our events, you do want the lights and stuff like that because not everybody can see or can tap into it and that kind of helps them out. But I did notice I was catching myself a little more, tapping more into that spiritual side of trying to bring it more in, of asking different ways of things. Everybody says you need to respect spirit. They were, humans one time, they walked the earth.
Right.
So, why are we speaking to them like we are trying to train a puppy dog not to pee on the carpet? And I started just reevaluating everything as we're doing these of how do we get on their level and start speaking to them as if they're, because a lot of them think they're still here. Now, mind you, there are good and bad ones. So we want people to understand that.
Right.
But if there's a bad one, that, when you're talking to a male from 1800s, early 1900s, they don't speak to us females all the time because they're like, "Who are you and why are you speaking this way?"
Right.
So, changing the way your voice is or the way you're trying to tap into them. And I've noticed that people are like, "Well, I didn't see it on this show, so this could not be working." And
Hmm.
it was just very interesting to see how people reacted to different ways of doing things. And none of it ever was part of being up on the level of that spirit.
Right. Well, and I think something too, it's important to distinguish is there's a difference between provoking a spirit and, like you said, because I've seen you do this so many times where you encounter a spirit that was just a nasty piece of work in life. That doesn't magically change when someone passes
No.
over and becomes a spirit. If they were nasty in life, chances are they are still just as nasty in spirit as well. And I've seen you because some of them try to intimidate and they try to bully, and I've seen you stand up to that, and you are very assertive. And there's a difference between being assertive and provoking. And
Yeah.
so that is the piece I want to make sure everyone who's listening understands. Provoking is intentionally provoking I kind of equate as insulting in a way.
Yes. That's
Whereas
being a bully. I mean,
right,
honestly, it's being a bully.
right.
But I do notice that when we do events and stuff, certain people are afraid if I don't speak a certain way, somebody will take that as I'm provoking.
Mhm,
And again, this is something because like if you're going into a prison, you can't sit there and say, "Sweetheart, tell me what was your fears?"
mhm,
That's not how they were. They were in prison. So, you have to kind of be in that sense of, okay, it's, chow time. Everybody come to the gate or whatever.
mhm,
But people would take offense to that. And I think what happens is we miss it because we figured, okay, they were in prison for something really bad. Soon as they passed away, they're, sweet as pie. And
Right.
and that's not the case. And when you do work with people that don't have a lot of abilities, they're just about the lights and the different things like that, it has become harder to get people to understand what these spirits are trying to say
Hmm.
because everybody's trying to walk that fine line, just like, I mean, that's why this show goes on because there are darker sides of everything. There's darker sides in the metaphysical, just like it is in the paranormal,
Right.
and so is it to the point where do we bring more of that spiritual metaphysical side, because we can't all stand there with the Care Bear stare and think, we're going to turn an evil spirit into a loving thing. I'm just
Right.
going to be real serious about this.
Right.
And we've been in those situations when we know something's super negative there, and they're like, well, just keep pushing all your love and light, push your love and light, and then all of a sudden it becomes a good spirit. Well, I'm just going to tell everybody that's BS. It does not work
Hmm.
that way.
And
So
we've actually
now,
watched people get hurt because of
because of that, yes. So, is it to the point where if we do have people with abilities or we have divination tools to utilize it to bring in more of that light to help navigate those investigations, you know, is this something that we need to look towards as we're keep continuing in the future of doing investigations
I I do. I think we
in
need,
general,
yeah, I think we need to bring more of the spiritual, the metaphysical stuff into it. And something I want to make sure that we're all clear on too is we keep saying this term divination tools. Um, and I want to kind of define that a little bit, where the act of divining something or the practice of divination is misunderstood. It's basically reaching out to, there's a million ways to think of it. It can, some people call it your higher self. Some people call it tapping into your subconscious. Some people say it's contacting with your spirit guides or your guardian angels or any kind of deities or anything like that. But regardless of who you define that this information is coming from, it is receiving information from the other side, whatever that means to you, whether that's a god or a goddess, whether that's guardian angels, whether that's someone that's passed on in spirit, any kind of practice that you do to get answers or information is considered divination. So, times where you mentioned using dowsing rods, that is a form of divination. Using a pendulum is a form of divination. And you've seen where certain individuals using dowsing rods, some people they work extremely well for, other
yes.
people pendulums work really well for. And those are things that we need to bring more into and don't even realize that these are technically paranormal investigation tools. And I use that term loosely, but they are tools that people use on investigations that double as forms of divination. So why don't we use more of these? I know sometimes with the pendulum it gets a little bit weird because, oh well, if the person holding it, if their hand is shaking or something like that, that might give false readings. And the same is true with dowsing rods. But I think at least trying to use those to some degree a little bit more and trying to take kind of the human error piece out of that as much as we can, but still authentically use these tools, I think we're opening ourselves up for a whole different kind of communication. Not every spirit wants or is able to make lights go off or to make a sound. Some of them, it really is, they are going to tap into the energy field of someone or a spiritual object, and that's where they're going to be able to interact.
And that's what, I've been kind of really thinking because, like I said, been kind of just watching it. Each year we're doing something, and I'm kind of like going, there's got to be other ways because we're not really tapping in to their side of getting what we want. You know, are there spirits out there that have been doing it and just kind of know, I'll just touch this light? Or is it just their energy field touching the light, you know? So, but we'll get back in this conversation here in just a couple of minutes. We're just going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. We now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com.
The Onyx Network classes and workshops are enrolling now for 2025. If you're interested in psychic protection, chakra balancing, dowsing, or perhaps healing with sound and music, visit onyxnetwork.com to see our complete series of live and on-demand classes and workshops hosted by the one and only Margie K. For example, in January 2025, you could spend 4 Saturdays with Margie for her exclusive live remote viewing workshop. Margie K is one of the most accomplished remote viewers in the world, and she will share her secrets and totally unique methods in this course. Some courses are open now. Seating is limited for these live courses, so register now at unxnetwork.com. Unx members use promo code XMEM for an additional 15% discount.
Welcome back, everyone, and everyone who has joined us or is continuing to join us. Welcome to the show, and Happy New Year to you all. Sorry, my nose is a little stuffy. For some reason, I had a sneeze attack, and now my nose is stuffy. Not sure what's going on. But let's bring Jake back on. Been having a great conversation. Something that I have been kind of looking into, paying attention, of how a lot of these paranormal investigations are going on, and how we're, handling it because it's always the same old, same old. Now, I
Mhm.
will tell you with a lot of our events, we do bring people down kind of to that level, calming the breathing, allowing things to come. We do protect our guests that come to these events. Don't get it wrong. We're not just going to say, hey, open up and I'm going to throw you in a dark corner and I'll see you later. Bye. But trying to get people to understand, not everybody has abilities to do things. Now, we all have some type of ability. I do strongly believe that. Not everyone's tapped into it, but we all get that feeling of something's not right, or the feeling of, hey, something's standing behind me. We all have those kind of things. And when we can bring people down and without being just really hyped up, worrying about all the lights going off, we have noticed that the investigation actually turns out to become a real investigation because now we're walking the same line as spirit as we're looking for some answers. And, I'm wondering, if it's time to take out part of that old to bring in a new to kind of start telling the correct stories of some of these spirits, and trying to figure out, why are they still there? Are they just visiting us?
Mhm.
Or are they trapped there? Do they not, because everybody says, well, this person came in and said they loved hanging out here, or this person said this was the last thing they remember. But are those all true statements unless you actually get it from spirit? And what better way of doing it is when you get like-minded people, which is a lot of our guests, to come together and bring that energy the way it needs to be so we can actually find out, why are you here? Or
Absolutely.
are you not here and we're actually in your realm? So maybe we're walking across you.
Mhm.
So that's where, we sit there and put that fine line between metaphysical, paranormal. But I feel like the two should be merged. What are your thoughts?
I agree, and it's interesting because as you were talking, it brought me back a little bit, especially the part where you said, "Are we on their realm?" And I'm looking back to this past summer. There were a group of us that got together, and there were a couple events that were going on, and we went to a variety of haunted locations that were
Yes.
not part of where we were doing our events, just throughout the day while we were trying to kill time, wait for our events to start later that evening. And we sort of all got to that point where we were like, where are we? Like, what are we even doing? What is time anymore? Now, part of that could have been the fact that we were on maybe an hour and a half of sleep. That's certainly something to consider. But we got to that point where it almost seemed like we crossed a barrier somewhere.
Yes.
And it was almost like, I don't know if saying we were in a different dimension is the right way to say it, but it felt like we were no longer in the same plane that we started out on.
And I'm going to cut you off for a minute. So, the night before we started this, Jake, you actually did a three-card reading of what that night was going to happen. And remember, the cards even made a comment like it already knew what the whole weekend was. It wasn't just reading that night. And it
Mhm.
was saying everything that we're going to see was almost going to be like the opposite of what we thought we were supposed to get.
Right.
So we were already getting spirit kind of telling us, your weekend is going to be not what you're expecting, even though
Right.
we were just trying to do a one night read. It already had told us our weekend and wasn't clicking with us until we got to the last location. Then we're like, oh my God, this is what it was starting to mean. And then you did another reading and it pretty
Yeah.
much kind of summed it up and then added some extras. But that's what I'm saying. At that point, we use that piece of not just our event, but everything else. And it was almost like spirit was already telling us, keep your eyes open, pay attention, because what you
Mhm.
see is not real. Look past it. And I remember those words because it was kind of like, okay, we're in a jail. What are we supposed to look at?
Right.
Not realizing your reading meant for the weekend and it was about to get real.
And I remember over some of the equipment we were using, over our different versions of the spirit box, it kept saying, "Listen, pay attention." And we're like,
Yes.
"What are we missing?
Yep.
What are we listening for?" And the number of times we all took a deep breath and said, "Okay, I'm listening." And it goes, "No, listen." And just we got so frustrated because we couldn't figure out what it meant until the end.
Yeah, and
And
it
when
was
we got
like
to the
your
end
cards
point,
were talking to us on equipment.
and I mean, the whole weekend was just something entirely different. I'd never experienced anything like that.
It
And the last location there was a place, I don't know if you remember this, but I was a little hesitant to do that 3-card reading at that location that we ended up in for that
Yep,
last night, and I decided to do it, and I'm not gonna say that it was bad or good, it was what it was, and what came out is what came out, but that was one of those places that things could have gone really bad really fast if we weren't careful. And things started to, actually. We had
yes.
to get people out of there before things got a little bit further. And those are kinds of the things where do I think we should approach spirit communication and investigation with more of a spiritual and metaphysical side? Yeah, I absolutely believe that. But again, we have to be careful because it's almost, think of it as like a home field advantage, right? When we're on their turf, they know that turf better than we do.
But, okay, so keep that in mind because if you think about it, if we wouldn't approach that the way we did using both equipment and paranormal, but added a little bit of the spiritual, would we probably would not have been as prepared as we were. Or, you know what I mean? Because that's where I'm saying, when we go in just with equipment and saying, okay, here, we're going to find us some ghosts,
Mm-hmm.
not realizing what kind of spirits are in there because we haven't tapped into it. We're just going to throw a machine out there to see what comes back at us.
Right.
But since we did the reading that night, the Friday night at the jail, and then we finish off trying to see, okay, we've been listening. Your cards was repeating itself over equipment,
Mm-hmm.
but then we also tapped in. We all kind of kept our eyes and ears open more of what could have happened.
Right.
And I think if we would have just walked through those front doors and just threw equipment all over the place and just go, I don't think we would be as prepared as we were.
No, that's a good point. And there's definitely some truth to that. Um, and we've even done places before where, because normally we do the 3 card readings in front of guests so that they hear what the reading is entailing, and then through the events, the course of the night, they can kind of decipher that for themselves. But there have been times too where I've gone up to you and been like, this is it's usually places we haven't been to before or places we have been before, but you and I look at each other or anyone else on the team that's been there before with abilities, and we all kind of look at each other and we're like, something's not right here. So I'll do a quick 3 card to try and get some information of what we can expect and maybe what's going on. And there have been times where I've approached you and been like, Michelle, I'm not going to do this in front of guests, but something's wrong here and we need to have an idea of what it is so that we can make sure that things go according to plan and people are safe, and we kind of know how to navigate the night. Because you're right, if we went in blind, especially the second location, um and we still already had a teammate get scratched, 7
Yes.
scratch marks.
Yes.
And I think if we had gone into that not knowing that we needed to kind of have our wits about us and be mindful that things aren't necessarily what they seem, I think, yeah, things could have gotten a lot worse. And so maybe I need to go back and amend my statement that it's not so much of yes, we should or no, we shouldn't. It's no matter what we're doing on the investigation, we need to be protected and make sure we're doing what we can to protect the people that are with us. Because in that situation, if we went in with a lack of information, things could have gone a whole lot worse.
True. And and people have to remember too, when you're going on these investigations and you're doing, anything that has to do with groups of people, people you don't know, you're already adding other energies into a situation. So you have the location, then you have everybody else's energy, not knowing what those are. And then you're bringing it all together. I mean, that's like making a pot of vegetable soup. You're just throwing stuff in there and, season it up a little bit.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, of course, our equipment and all that will do it because that's what we need to do. But I feel like, we've been kind of missing that piece of the metaphysical side because when we're doing metaphysical stuff, whether it's meditation or doing oil blends or whatever
Hmm.
you're doing, you're working with spirit trying to make these things. There's something calling you to make these. There's a reason why you're drawn to it. It's not
Right.
just because you woke up one day and say, hey, I'm going to make me some herbal tea just for
Hmm.
the hell of it. So we're already tapping into kind of that spiritual side of things to actually do that stuff. So, we're always tapping into that other side, so why are we not taking some of that and bring it to where it really needs to be, and that
Mhm.
being in the locations? And that's anywhere because, you think about it, we don't know when a location is actually haunted or not. I
Right.
mean, we just go by what it says. It's out there, most haunted location. I mean, so think about the Victorian view. All
Mhm.
we heard was there's a little bit here and there that goes on. Well, we found out, and a lot of our guests found out,
There's
it's
a
way
lot
more
more.
than that, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
we went in because it was a new place. So, we really didn't tap into that spiritual side completely because we're just like, let's just check this place out. Let's go for it. But makes you wonder because then after that, when we had, guests come, you did do some readings, whether it was before the guests came or
Mhm.
with the guests. And there was always those little bit of warnings there that things are not as they make out to be, kind of look past things. So that helped us navigate the investigations
Right.
and helping our guests navigate certain things that were happening.
Well,
But yet we don't do it all the time. And I feel like, it's been kind of one of those, scratch your head moments of, okay, how do these blend? Because they do.
I mean, and you're right, they absolutely do. And think about what the term spiritual means, right? It
Correct.
means something of or referring to spirit. So there are a variety of different spiritual beliefs, and religion versus spirituality is an entirely different conversation. But you mentioned using herbal teas or holistic medicine, things like that, blending oils, because there are oils for protection. There are stone combinations that are great for protection and things like that. And there's a spiritual belief, again, of or referring to spirit, called animism. And this is the idea, primarily, from my understanding, primarily it's a focus on living things, but everything has a spirit. And like if we look at stones or herbs, those stones have those properties. Those herbs treat certain things or support certain types of wellness based on the spirit within those herbs or stones or oils or whatever it is that you might be using. And I think that's the piece that we're forgetting when we go on an investigation. We're not just investigating, we are having a spiritual um, experience. We are experiencing spirit. And I think this is kind of what you're getting at, is we're missing this whole part where we need to tap into the fact that there is spirit around us, and we're just going into it as trying to have a conversation. And to a point, yes, we need to treat them as people because they were. And many of them, if they don't know they're dead, they still believe that they are people. But we're missing that part that spirit and spiritual, they are the same. They are two, they come from the same etymology. And so they have the same point of reference. And by neglecting that and not going into an investigation with that kind of mentality that we are interacting with spirit, we are having a spiritual connection and a spiritual experience, we're missing out, like you said, on all of the different messages that maybe we're trying to get, or types of interaction. Maybe we're misunderstanding the type of interaction because we're not going at it, we're not looking at it in the right way. We're not looking at it as my spirit is interacting with your spirit.
Correct. Correct. And that's the thing. I don't think they're interacting with us as, our flesh.
Hmm.
Their spirit is probably seeing our spirit, and we're trying to make that communication. So, are they hearing the actual words coming out of our mouths, or are they feeling the intentions we're asking, the what we're putting out there as we're asking those questions? And that's some of the things we have to look because, we get this tunnel vision of if it's not in a history book, then it can't be true, you
Right.
know? And yet, we're trying to rewrite history on the physical realm. Why can't we look at this on the spiritual realm of, okay, just because they said this person was the governor of this little town and everybody loved him, but we can feel his spirit side of, okay, he was not that nice, what they wrote.
Mhm.
We're tapping into something. Why is it because he's spirit and we say this person's bad now that people don't want to believe it? Like, oh my God, no, we can't believe that. Because everybody has secrets.
Right.
And like they say, a lot of people take secrets to the grave.
Mhm.
But yet, when we're investigating, that is not a true statement then.
And we've seen it before, people with abilities, when they start touching on the truth,
Yes.
not the stories that have been told, but the actual truth. We have seen where those entities stop interacting.
Yep.
They shut down and they make everything stop.
Yes.
And we've also had conversations at certain places where we've sat people down and they're like, well, we know that like this place was um, uh, I'll use Waverly, for example, because I didn't know this about Waverly before we went there, that after it was a tuberculosis hospital, it also served as a psychiatric hospital. And I didn't know that. And a lot of buildings have those multiple uses. They were this for a while, and then they were this, and then they were something else. And when a lot of these people are talking about when these buildings were whatever, they talk about, oh, this was the child's ward of the psychiatric hospital, or this is the child's ward of the orphanage. I mean, if it's an orphanage, they're probably all children, but we talk about, oh, this is where the kids were. So it should be light and playful and things like that. But then when we sit back and look at it and go, wait a minute, this was a place where 9-year-olds were undergoing electroshock therapy. This was not a happy place for them. Why are we continuing when we know that in that situation, that would not have been a happy situation? Why are we still playing it off as this was all happy fun, butterflies and rainbows, when we know it couldn't have been?
Correct. And when you do start tapping in, like I said, with like the spiritual side, now you're able to talk to that spirit that is still in pain,
Mhm.
still confused, of maybe saying, I can feel your pain. I am so sorry for you, to hear something else come out.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm going because we use it for everything. Everybody, you talk about it, doesn't matter if it's spiritual, religious, however you come to it. When we're tapping into these things, I think we need to start becoming more on the levels of where we're going. I understand a lot of people that own these places don't want people to be scared off. And
Right.
I
Absolutely.
totally get that because if I owned a place, I wouldn't either, but I wouldn't keep it completely hidden. But,
Right.
you still wanna, okay, so we know these people were in agony. Even with the TB hospitals, think about it. Could you imagine going to that hospital knowing as soon as you walk through those doors, you'll never walk out? You're never
Right.
gonna see your family. You're never gonna do any of that. So, will you have made the best of times while you were there? Well, most likely, but you sure wasn't in happy partying mood.
Right.
So, let me hear about the pain you went through. Let them speak about the sorrows, missing their families and stuff. I think
Mm.
those are true conversations with the other side. I might sound really crap crazy right now, but I think we've been asking all the wrong questions.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and we've had several conversations about that.
Yeah,
Everyone goes in and asks, what year is it? Um, you know, what, I don't know, how did you die? Do you know you're dead? All of those different things. And what we should be going into, and we've done this before, where instead of what year is it, I've
yeah,
turned that question on its head and been like, What's the last headline in the newspapers you remember?
Yep.
And we've gotten responses where they are talking about headlines about historical events, or we
Yes.
ask, who's the president?
Yes.
And we've gotten responses of presidents from the early 1900s, and that pinpoints, okay, we're dealing with an energy from this particular era.
Yes.
And because sometimes and I'm trying to think of this from the perspective, if they don't know they're dead, how are you going to react? Put yourselves in their shoes. How are you going to react if someone comes up to you and says, "What year is it?" I'm going to be sitting there going, "What do you mean, what year is it? Why are you asking me this? What are you
Yeah.
talking about?" But if you
Yep.
ask me, "Hey, what's going on in the news right now?" Now I might be like, "Oh, okay, well, we've got this going on, or this is happening. This person just won this election, or what have you. This huge catastrophe just happened." And that's something I think they're more likely to discuss, especially if they don't realize they're dead.
Correct. And that's the thing, that is where I'm talking about tapping into the spiritual side of yourself and the environment to get those kind of answers
Mhm,
instead of just going in cold. And again, we all have that ability to tap
mhm,
into it. Just like when we talk about the religious side of things, people still get with their spirit. If you go to church or you pray, you're tapping into that
mhm,
to speak, to God. Same type of concepts in everything we do, but then when we go on an investigation, we cut it, split it in the middle. Boom, it's
right.
either this or this. And again, you're correct. I think looking at this as people are going out to investigate, of course, you're always going to have to protect yourself. We have to protect ourselves all the time.
Mhm,
But looking at it as if you were spirit, what would you want to hear or how would you want to be approached? If it's a woman, how many children do you have?
mm, sure.
Things like that because you're talking to another woman.
Mhm,
How many boys do you have? How many girls do you have? And the more I've been watching and seeing how things are evolving, because then when you get towards a negative energy, they're not going to be able to answer that question,
right. And I've
because
seen you do that.
yeah,
At one location, you asked, "Tell me what year it is." Like, even though I just said that that was a bad question to ask, you knew what you were doing because you knew what you were dealing with, and you were demonstrating a point by doing this. And you kept asking that same question over and over and over, and things were getting ramped up because the entity couldn't respond.
no,
Was incapable of being able to respond to that question, and so, um, it the entity that you were interacting with at that moment, because you kept repeating the question, knew that you knew what was going on.
yes,
And that frustrated it because it was this particular entity was one that, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it a trickster. It wants you to think it's one way when in reality it's very much the opposite. It was a very dark entity, but didn't necessarily want that to be known. And so we see that a lot where those entities, when we do start speaking the truth, we know someone wasn't very good in life, even though in the public eye they were very well loved. We There have been places where, knowing they've got ties to, um, the Underground Railroad,
yep,
where we have, I mean, you've talked. There are children at some of these places, and we've looked down. We've said, okay, the master of the house is gone. If you want to leave, now's your time. But I need you to grab my hand, and I'll lead you out of here. I will help you get out of here.
yes,
And we get so many great responses when that happened. Or one of the scariest things that we did, was
yeah,
playing a recording of a song that slaves would have sung in the cotton fields. That was a map for the Underground Railroad. Playing that in a location where there was that history. with the Underground Railroad. That got a really unexpected reaction out of spirit when we did that. And to the point
Because
where,
it was stated it
right,
was part of the good part of the Underground Railroad. For us to find out it wasn't. It was
right.
almost like a trap. And so we got the bad part of it. So yeah, it was not the greatest thing.
And your poor son getting thrown around like a little rag doll.
I know. But again, that's, it brings it all down to the same thing, guys. No matter how you approach an investigation, whether you just go out with friends, you go to an event, or you're doing it on your own, or you're doing it in your home, which I hope you're not. But remember, you're using your spirit, your, protection around you. Just because we have flesh does not mean we don't have, a soul. That
Mhm.
I think everybody uses it. That's just the way it is. We do have to protect ourselves, but I think we need to tap in a little more to start getting on that level.
Right.
And we're about to leave for the evening. Jake, I want to thank you for joining me talking about the two because it is something we've discussed before. But, really watching it and seeing it kind of build where, could lead us to the next year because we always grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to thank all my listeners out there for joining us. I have a long list of great guests going to be joining us now each week. Um, but also thanking you guys for the support, sending you lots of love. Until next time, I'll see you in the dark.